All right. In this video, we are going to talk about events in Python. Tkinter events. So first up, I need to talk a little bit about event-driven programming versus procedural programming. So event-driven programming is where the flow of the program is determined by uh, things like user action as a mouse, like for instance, a mouse click or a key press. Could be something else that's maybe not driven exactly by the user, but the environment, like sensor outputs or other messages from other programs or threads. Okay, procedural programming basically is where you have some instructions, and those instructions are just sort of carried out one after the other, and kind of like you're cooking following a recipe to cook something. But where event-driven programming, your application is sort of just sitting there waiting for the user to interact with it. And when the user interacts with it, it generates something called an event, and then your program is going to react to that event. Okay. So that event-driven program is sort of the dominant paradigm used in graphical user interface programs like we're talking about with Tkinter and other things like web applications. So the first example that we're going to talk about is for the button. And so what we want to do is for a button, when the user clicks on it, right, we want that's going to generate an event. And then what we want to happen is for a function to get called based on that, or a method, depending on where we locate it. So here, to do that, right, what you want to do is to use this command optional parameter here for the button. So here I'm creating a button in the usual way that we have been. It still has the parent, has the text that goes on the button. And then what I do is add this command equals, and then over here on the right hand side, what I do is I put the name of the method that I want, or function that I want to call when the user clicks the button. Okay. So as an example, let's take a look at this TK button event. All right, so here what we've got is we're setting up the root window here, and we're creating a button, and that button goes in this in the root object. That's going to say click me, and then here is where I set the command option. We can see that the command option is set to pushed button, and so that will call this method right here, or this function pushed button, and you can see that just prints you push the button. Okay, so it's incredibly simple. So when I run this, here's what I'm going to get, and then every time I click the button now, it should print you push the button down here. So there you go. Okay. So when I click the button, it generates an event. Tkinter and Python knows, okay, when that event is generated, then I call this push button method. So it jumps to here and prints you push the button. Now, a lot of times in a graphical user interface application, you are not going to be printing in the console like this because generally the user can't see that. But just for these first examples, I just wanted to try and keep them as simple as possible. So that's why I'm printing down here. Normally that's not something that you're going to do, but it was just easy to write this and show you how that goes. Okay. So that is all you have to do for a button, and we're going to use that to do other things in our program. So that's for buttons. The other type of widget that we want to control is the entry widget. The entry widget you have to do a little bit differently than the button. Okay, so the entry widget doesn't have that command option. Instead, what you want to do is use the bind method to bind an event with a function. So on this example for the entry, what we want to have happen is that when the user is in the entry widget and they press the enter key, right, then we want some action to happen. All right, so what we do is on the entry. Let's say it's called my entry. We're going to call the bind function, or actually it's a method here because it's inside the object. And then the first argument here is going to be the type of event. Now, to keep track of the enter key, what you want to do is enter the string return inside angle brackets in there. Now, there's a whole host of other events for different widgets. So what you would need to do is, depending on what you want to track, you would need to look up what needs to go here when you bind that to your widget. Okay, so there's lots of these. If you look in the documentation, you'll find some often used ones. So other things that you might have when you click on the mouse, that one's going to be called button. There's other ones for like the left mouse button or when you drag across, right? So there's all different kinds of events. So, and then the second argument, as before with command, is going to be the function that you want called when this event is detected. Okay. All right, let's take a look at this example. So TK entry event. So here I've set everything up as normal. Here I set up my entry. And then here I do the binding, right? So my entry.bind and then return, press to enter. One thing about this is that wherever you do the binding, that function, the way we've got things set up, needs to be above this line where you actually do the binding. Okay, that's because Python, when it interprets this, needs to have encountered the pressed enter event previously. As things get more and more complicated, that's going to be kind of a pain to deal with, and so later on we'll look at a different way to organize things. Okay, so here what's going to happen is that when the user is in the entry widget, right, and they press the enter key, it's going to call this method. So it's going to come up here, right, and it's going to press the enter key here. So let's run that, make sure it goes okay. Okay, so here I am in the entry widget. You can type stuff. That's not really going to trigger it or make any difference in this example. It's when I actually press the enter key. So I'm going to do that. And you can see I press the enter key here. So every time I press the enter key, it's going to print that down here. Again, that's not something that I would normally do, right? It's just to try and keep this as simple as possible. Now, you might notice one key difference right here, and that is here I have this event as the a parameter in here. I didn't have to do that with the button. You can have that in there, right? But here I didn't have it. But with this, if I try to take that out, and do that, you can see it's going to complain when I press that. And you can see it says pressed enter takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. So I need to have this parameter here for the event. So I just called it event. And then that works. All right, so that's the difference between the bind approach and the command for the button. Okay, so we're going to stop there. In the next video, we are going to take a look at how to control labels and entries with these events.